June 15, 2009, Culiacan, Mexico. DEA agent Marcus Valdez had 30 seconds to choose between capturing El Chapo and saving his partner's life. He chose his partner. The warehouse exploded. Chapo vanished. 6 months later, Marcus was forced into early retirement with a fabricated story about operational failures. What the DEA never knew was that another cartel boss was supposed to be in that warehouse too. A man who arrived 3 hours late to his meeting with El Chapo, a man whose tardiness saved both their lives and changed the course of the drug war forever. 15 years later, when Marcus's daughter goes missing, he receives a photograph of that same warehouse and a simple message: "Your partner sends his regards." The betrayal that ended Marcus's career wasn't random, it was orchestrated, and the man he saved that night has been pulling strings ever since. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Valdez's hands trembled as he stared at the photograph for the third time in 10 minutes. The warehouse looked exactly as he remembered. Corrugated metal walls pocked with bullet holes, the loading dock where Danny had taken shrapnel to the chest, the narrow alley where El Chapo had vanished into the Culiacan night like smoke. The message beneath it was worse: "Your partner sends his regards." Danny Morrison had died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Marcus had been at the funeral, watched them lower the casket into Phoenix soil while Danny's ex-wife sobbed into a black handkerchief. So either someone was playing a sick joke, or the man he'd called partner for 8 years had been lying about more than Marcus ever imagined. The photograph had arrived with Sophia's phone. No ransom demand, no negotiation, just the image and those 5 words that made his blood freeze. Marcus pushed back from his kitchen table and walked to the window overlooking the Tucson suburbs. His security company occupied the converted garage behind the house. 2 computers, a filing cabinet, and enough surveillance equipment to handle cheating spouse cases and small business theft. Not exactly the career he'd envisioned after 23 years with the DEA, but it paid the bills and kept him invisible. His phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You have 48 hours to come alone to the coordinates I'm texting you. Bring the file you kept from Culiacan. The real one, not the sanitized version you gave Internal Affairs." Marcus nearly dropped the phone. Who is this? Someone who knows you never destroyed evidence. Someone who knows what really happened in that warehouse. And someone who has your daughter watching the sunset over the desert while she still can. The line went dead. A text followed immediately, GPS coordinates and a timestamp. Midnight. Tomorrow. Marcus stared at the numbers and felt his chest tighten. He didn't need to punch them into his GPS to know where they led. 23 years of law enforcement had burned certain locations into his memory like scars. These coordinates were burned deeper than most. The warehouse in Culiacan, or what was left of it. He grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. The file cabinet sat in the corner, locked behind 2 deadbolts and a combination lock that only he knew. Inside the bottom drawer, beneath 15 years of business insurance documents and tax returns, was a manila envelope he'd sworn never to open again. The Culiacan file, the real one. His fingers hesitated over the envelope's edge. Opening it meant admitting that everything he'd told himself about that night was a lie. It meant confronting the possibility that Danny, his partner, his friend, the man whose life he'd saved by letting the world's most wanted drug lord escape, had orchestrated his own betrayal. Marcus tore open the envelope. The photographs spilled across his desk like accusation letters. Danny talking to someone in the shadows outside the warehouse. Time-stamped 40 minutes before the raid. Danny's hand on the radio, speaking to someone who wasn't DEA dispatch. Danny looking directly at the camera, Marcus's camera, with an expression that wasn't surprise. It was relief. Marcus's vision blurred. 15 years of guilt, 15 years of wondering if he'd made the right choice, 15 years of believing he'd saved his partner's life. But Danny hadn't been in danger. Danny had been in control. The warehouse explosion hadn't been bad luck or poor intelligence. It had been planned, choreographed, and Marcus had played his part perfectly, choosing loyalty over duty while Danny watched El Chapo disappear into the night. But why? Why risk everything? Why destroy Marcus's career and let a monster walk free? His phone rang again. Same unknown number. You opened the file. It wasn't a question. What do you want? Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. Justice, truth. The same things you wanted 15 years ago before Danny Morrison convinced you to choose the wrong side. Danny's dead. Danny Morrison is dead, but the man who stood in that warehouse and made a deal with El Chapo, the man who sacrificed your career to protect his operation, the man who built an empire while you fixed broken marriages and insurance fraud, he's very much alive. And he has Sophia. Marcus closed his eyes. What's his real name? You'll know soon enough. Midnight tomorrow. Coordinates I sent. Come alone, bring the file, and maybe your daughter lives to see her next birthday. How do I know she's alive? The phone buzzed with an incoming video. Sophia bound to a chair in what looked like a concrete room, her prosecutor's blazer torn, her dark hair matted with blood. She looked directly into the camera and mouthed 2 words, "Trust no one." The video ended. Marcus was already reaching for his gun safe when the phone rang one final time. Different number. Familiar voice. Marcus? It's Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. We need to talk now. Your daughter's investigation wasn't random. She was getting close to something big. Something that goes back to Culiacan. Marcus stared at his phone screen. Agent Chen's words echoing in the sudden silence of his converted garage office. The familiar voice carried 15 years of history. Chen had been a junior analyst when the Culiacan operation went sideways, one of the few who'd questioned the official report. Now she was calling about Sophia. How did you get this number? Marcus asked, though he already knew. The FBI had ways of finding anyone, especially disgraced former agents whose daughters prosecuted cartel cases. We've been monitoring communications related to Sophia's investigation. Marcus, someone leaked her location to the cartels. Someone with access to federal databases. The words hit him like ice water. His daughter hadn't stumbled into danger. She'd been handed to it. Marcus sank into his desk chair, the weight of Danny's betrayal still crushing his chest. What was she investigating? A cold case. Financial transfers from 2008, right after Culiacan. Someone moved $40 million through shell companies in the weeks following El Chapo's escape. Sophia connected it to 3 unsolved prosecutor murders in Sonora. Marcus closed his eyes. Danny's face flashed in his memory. Not the dying partner he'd mourned, but the man in the photographs, orchestrating betrayal with surgical precision. Chen, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Was Danny Morrison really dead when they buried him? The silence stretched too long. Why would you ask that? 'Cause I'm looking at photos of him talking to someone outside the warehouse 40 minutes before our raid. Because someone just told me Danny Morrison is dead, but the man who betrayed us is very much alive. Because my daughter is going to die if I don't figure out who I can trust. Chen's exhale crackled through the phone. Meet me at the Copper Star Diner on Speedway. 1 hour. Come armed. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, then at the scattered photographs on his desk. Danny's face looked up at him from a dozen different angles, frozen in moments of deception that Marcus had been too loyal to see. He gathered the photos with trembling hands, each image a knife twist in his chest. The gun safe opened with a soft click. Inside, his service weapon sat wrapped in an oilcloth, exactly where he'd placed it 4 years ago after Danny's funeral. The Glock felt foreign in his hands now, heavier than he remembered, or maybe he was just older, weaker. Too many years of photographing cheating spouses and insurance fraudsters had made him soft. But Sophia was out there. Sophia with her fierce prosecutor's eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, tied to a chair in some concrete room while men who traded in death decided her fate. The thought of losing her, the only good thing he'd managed not to destroy, made his hands steady. Marcus tucked the gun into his shoulder holster and grabbed his keys. The house felt different as he walked through it, like he was seeing it for the last time. 15 years of careful invisibility, of building a quiet life in the desert suburbs where no one asked about his past. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee he'd abandoned when the first call came. His reading glasses sat folded beside yesterday's newspaper, next to a photo of Sophia at her law school graduation. She'd worn her mother's earrings that day. Pearls that had belonged to Elena's grandmother, passed down through generations of strong women who'd loved dangerous men. Elena had died wearing them. Car accident on a rainy Phoenix night while Marcus was working late on another case that mattered more than coming home for dinner. He'd promised himself he wouldn't make the same mistake with Sophia, wouldn't let the job consume everything that mattered. But here he was, 15 years later, racing against time to save the daughter he'd pushed away to protect her from exactly this kind of darkness. The Glock pressed against his ribs as he walked to his truck. In the distance, the Catalina Mountains caught the last light of sunset, their peaks painted gold against the purple sky. Elena had loved the desert sunsets, said they reminded her that beautiful things could bloom in impossible places. Marcus started the engine and backed out of his driveway, watching his house disappear in the rearview mirror. The Copper Star Diner was 20 minutes away through Tucson traffic, but his mind was already racing ahead to midnight tomorrow, to coordinates that would take him back to the place where his career died and his partner revealed his true face. The radio played soft country music as he drove, but all Marcus could hear was Sophia's voice from their last conversation 3 weeks ago. "Dad, I'm working on something big. Something that might finally put some real monsters away." She'd sounded excited, proud, like she was finally living up to the ideals he'd abandoned in a Culiacan warehouse. Now those ideals might get her killed, and the only way to save her was to trust someone, Chen, the mysterious caller, maybe even Danny's ghost, in a world where trust was the deadliest weapon of all. The Copper Star Diner sat like a neon island in the desert darkness, its vintage sign buzzing with electrical ghosts. Marcus pulled into the gravel parking lot and killed the engine, watching the few late-night diners through plate glass windows. Truckers mostly, their rigs idling in the shadows like sleeping giants. The kind of place where conversations died when strangers walked in. Agent Sarah Chen was already there, hunched over coffee in a corner booth with her back to the wall. She'd aged well, still sharp-featured with intelligent eyes, though gray now streaked her black hair. 15 years of FBI service had carved lines around those eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much and trusting too little. "You look like hell," she said as Marcus slid across from her. "Feel worse." He signaled the waitress for coffee, though his hands were already shaking enough. "Tell me about Danny." Chen glanced around the diner, cataloging exits and potential threats with practiced efficiency. "Danny Morrison died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, just like the obituary said. I went to the funeral, same as you. But the man you knew as Danny Morrison wasn't who you thought he was." Chen reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a classified file. Real name was Daniel Morales. Born in Nogales, raised between both sides of the border. DEA recruited him straight out of college, but he was already on cartel payroll. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. "That's impossible. I worked with him for 8 years, ate dinner at his house. His ex-wife was in on it. The whole identity was constructed. Deep cover that went so deep it became real." Chen swiped to another screen. Financial records, wire transfers, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. Danny was El Chapo's inside man from the beginning. Every operation you two ran, every raid, every arrest, all of it was designed to eliminate Chapo's competition while keeping him untouchable. Marcus stared at the numbers scrolling past. Millions of dollars. Years of payments. His entire career had been a lie, his partnership a performance orchestrated by the very people he'd sworn to fight. "The Culiacan warehouse," Marcus whispered, "was supposed to be your final performance. Danny was going to die a hero, killed in the line of duty while El Chapo escaped. Except you saved his life instead of following protocol. Screwed up the whole script." The coffee arrived, but Marcus couldn't lift the cup. His hands were shaking too badly. "So he faked his death 4 years ago. Had to. You'd started asking questions about discrepancies in old cases. Sophia was digging into the same financial irregularities as part of her cold case review. Danny, or whatever he's calling himself now, couldn't risk exposure." Chen leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Marcus, there's something else, something that's going to hurt." But before she could continue, her phone buzzed. Then Marcus's. Then every phone in the diner all at once, like some digital alarm clock from hell. The message was identical on every screen. A live video feed showing Sophia tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. But it wasn't the same concrete room from the earlier video. This was somewhere else, somewhere familiar. Jesus Christ, Chen breathed. That's the original Culiacan warehouse, the real one. On screen, a figure stepped into frame behind Sophia. The camera quality was poor, the lighting harsh, but Marcus recognized the silhouette immediately, the way Danny held his shoulders, the casual way he checked his watch, like punctuality still mattered after all these years of living lies. When Danny looked directly into the camera, his face was older, scarred by surgery that had changed his features just enough to fool facial recognition software. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd spent 15 years building an empire while his former partner fixed broken marriages. "Hello, Marcus," Danny said, his voice crackling through phone speakers across the diner. "I see you found Agent Chen. Good. Saves me the trouble of hunting her down later." Other diners were staring now, confused by the synchronized message, but Chen was already moving, her hand sliding toward her weapon. "Chen's been very busy these last few months," Danny continued. "Following digital breadcrumbs, connecting financial dots, building a case against a ghost. What she hasn't told you yet is that Sophia wasn't randomly assigned to that cold case review. I made sure she got it." Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. "Why?" "Because she's bait, old friend. Just like you were bait 15 years ago. Just like Chen is bait right now." Danny's scarred face smiled. "The difference is, this time I'm not pretending to be on your side." The video feed cut to black. In the silence that followed, Marcus heard his phone buzz with a text message. New coordinates. Same timestamp. Midnight tomorrow. But these coordinates weren't for the Culiacan warehouse. They were for the desert outside Tucson, 20 miles from where they sat. The past hadn't just returned. It had brought the war home. The diner erupted into confused murmurs as other patrons stared at their phones, trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Marcus sat frozen, Danny's words echoing in his skull like gunshots. "Just like you were bait 15 years ago." The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, ceramic shattering against the table. "We need to leave. Now." Chen was already standing, her eyes scanning the parking lot through the window. "If Danny can hijack every phone in here, he knows exactly where we are." But Marcus couldn't move. The coordinates burned in his vision. Desert coordinates he recognized from 100 surveillance operations over the years. An old mining camp where smugglers used to cache drugs before Border Patrol increased patrols. Remote, defensible, the perfect place for an execution. "This is wrong," Marcus whispered. "I'm not going to that meeting. I'm calling in every favor I have, getting a tactical team." "With what authority?" Chen's voice cut through his denial. "You're a private citizen. I'm FBI, but this is DEA jurisdiction, and half the agents who'd respond to a call like this could be compromised." Danny didn't survive this long by being careless about who he owns. The weight of her words settled over him like concrete. No backup, no cavalry. Just two people against a man who'd spent 15 years building a network of corruption that reached into every law enforcement agency in the Southwest. Marcus forced himself to stand on unsteady legs. "Then we disappear. Take Sophia's case files and run. Find somewhere Danny can't reach us." "He's already reached us." Chen grabbed his arm as they walked toward the exit. "The question is how long he's been watching. How long he's been planning this." Outside, the desert air bit cold against Marcus's skin. His truck sat where he'd left it, but something felt wrong. Too quiet. The truckers who'd been unloading cargo were gone, their rigs still idling but empty. Even the highway traffic seemed muted. Chen. Marcus stopped walking. When did Sophia really get assigned to that cold case? She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Chen. When? 6 months ago. Right after Danny's cancer went into remission. The lie hit him like ice water. "You said he died 4 years ago." "No, I said Danny Morrison died 4 years ago. The man we buried, the funeral you attended, that was someone else. A body double. Terminal cancer patient who matched Danny's general build." Chen's voice carried the weight of horrible revelation. The real Danny has been alive this entire time, Marcus, watching us, watching Sophia, waiting. Marcus braced himself against his truck, the metal cold under his palm. 15 years of guilt over his partner's death. 15 years of carrying the weight of that choice in the warehouse. And Danny had been alive the whole time, laughing at him probably. The loyal fool who'd sacrificed his career to save a ghost. There's more. Chen unlocked her sedan, movements sharp with controlled panic. The financial transfers Sophia was investigating, they weren't from 2008. They're current, happening now. Danny's been moving money to set up something big. Something that requires eliminating everyone who might expose him. The 3 dead prosecutors in Sonora were just the beginning. Sophia found a list, Marcus. 14 names of federal agents and prosecutors who've gotten too close to the truth over the years. She was number 15. Chen's hands shook as she started her engine. Guess who's number 14? Marcus didn't need to guess. The target painted on his back had been there for years. He'd just been too stupid to see it. Every case Sophia investigated, every cold file she reviewed, every step toward the truth had been orchestrated to bring them all together in the desert, where Danny could close his books permanently. His phone buzzed again. Not Danny this time. A text from an unknown number. 3 more prosecutors died tonight. Phoenix, El Paso, Albuquerque. Clock's ticking. The news hit local radio 20 minutes later as Marcus followed Chen's taillights through empty Tucson streets. 3 simultaneous car bombings. 3 federal prosecutors who'd been investigating cross-border financial crimes. The kind of coordinated strike that required resources, planning, and inside information. The kind of operation that announced the beginning of war. Chen's brake lights flared as she pulled into an abandoned gas station off the interstate. Through her rear window, Marcus could see her on the phone, arguing with someone in sharp-clipped sentences. FBI brass, probably. People who'd want to handle this through proper channels that no longer existed. When she hung up, her face was pale in the dashboard light. "They're pulling me off the case," she said as Marcus approached her car. Officially, there is no case. Sophia's investigation never happened. The prosecutors tonight were random cartel violence. And you're just a concerned father whose daughter went missing. Unofficially? Unofficially, we're on our own. Just like Danny planned. Chen looked toward the distant mountains where midnight waited. He's been 15 years ahead of us this entire time, Marcus. The only question left is whether we're walking into a rescue or an execution. Marcus stared at Chen's pale face in the dashboard light, her words hanging in the desert air like smoke from a funeral pyre. 15 years ahead of us. The phrase echoed in his skull as he walked back to his truck, each step feeling like he was sinking deeper into quicksand that Danny had been pouring around his feet since the day they first met. His phone rang as he reached for the door handle. Unknown number, but Marcus knew who it would be before he answered. "You're wondering how long?" Danny's voice was different now. Older, rougher, like gravel mixed with honey. "How long I've been watching you stumble around Tucson, playing private detective with cheating wives and insurance frauds. How long I've been orchestrating this beautiful reunion." Marcus closed his eyes, pressing the phone against his ear, like he could somehow reach through and strangle the ghost on the other end. "How long?" "Since the day you saved my life, in that warehouse, partner. Since the moment you chose to drag me out of there, instead of chasing El Chapo like a good little soldier." Danny's laugh was bitter, empty. "You have no idea how much that fucked up the timeline." Through his truck's window, Marcus could see Chen pacing beside her sedan, her FBI training warring with the reality that all her protocols were useless now. No backup was coming, no tactical teams, no cavalry riding over the horizon. Just 2 broken people racing toward coordinates that would either save Sophia or bury them all. "I was supposed to die that night," Danny continued. "Heroic DEA agent killed in the line of duty, posthumous medal, closed casket because of the burns. Perfect ending to a perfect cover. But you had to be noble, had to be loyal, had to save your partner's life like some fucking movie hero." Marcus opened his truck door but didn't get in. His legs felt like water. "So you disappeared instead." "Had to. Took me 3 years to arrange another death convincing enough to fool you." 3 years of watching you spiral into guilt and bourbon while I rebuilt my network from the shadows. Do you know what that cost me, Marcus? What I lost because you couldn't follow simple orders? The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, dark and infinite and unforgiving. Somewhere out there, Sophia was tied to a chair in a warehouse that had haunted Marcus's dreams for 15 years. The same warehouse where his partner had died, except his partner hadn't died, had never been his partner at all, had been playing a role so deep and so perfect that Marcus had mourned him for 4 years. The cancer was real, though, Danny said, and something in his voice shifted, became almost human again. Terminal pancreatic, stage 4. 6 months to live, they said. That's when I knew it was time to clean house, time to settle accounts. But you didn't die. Experimental treatment in Mexico. El Chapo's personal physician, brilliant man, very expensive. Bought me another few years, but the clock's still ticking, partner. Which is why we're having this conversation tonight instead of next year. Marcus finally understood. Not just the betrayal, not just the elaborate performance, but the timing. Danny wasn't just tying up loose ends. He was racing against his own mortality. A dying man with nothing left to lose except the secrets that could destroy an empire. Sophia, Marcus said, let her go. This is between us. Is it? Danny's voice turned cold again, surgical. Because from where I'm sitting, this is about 15 years of compound interest on the debt you created when you saved my life. This is about the 3 cartels that went to war because El Chapo escaped that night. About the 2,000 people who died in Mexico because you were too sentimental to let a bad cop burn. The numbers hit Marcus like physical blows. 2,000. The Juarez War. The Tijuana massacres. The bodies that piled up in morgues across Mexico while law enforcement chased ghosts and followed false leads. All of it traceable back to one night in Culiacan, when he'd chosen to save one life instead of ending a war. You want to know the real joke? Danny continued. I didn't even want to be saved. I was ready to die for the cause, Marcus, ready to take that bullet and let El Chapo slip away clean. But you had to play hero. Had to drag me out of that fire and fuck up everything. Chen was walking toward him now, her face grim with whatever orders she'd received from Washington. Orders to stand down, probably. Orders to let the professionals handle it. Orders written by people who didn't understand that the professionals had been compromised from the beginning. Midnight tomorrow, Danny said. Come alone. And maybe Sophia lives to prosecute another case. Bring backup, bring Chen, bring anyone except yourself, and I'll mail her back to you in pieces. Oh, and Marcus? Pack your service weapon. You're going to need it. The line went dead, leaving Marcus alone with the desert wind and the weight of 2,000 ghosts. Marcus stared at his silent phone, Danny's final words still echoing in the desert air. The weight of 2,000 ghosts pressed down on his shoulders like granite, but beneath the crushing guilt, a different kind of weight was settling into place. The weight of truth. The weight of finally understanding how completely he'd been played. Chen reached his truck, her face etched with the same hollow recognition that Marcus felt burning in his chest. My orders are to bring you in, she said quietly. Protective custody. Let this play out through proper channels. Proper channels. Marcus almost laughed, but the sound that came out was more like a death rattle. There are no proper channels anymore. Danny owns half the people who'd respond to those orders. He leaned against his truck's hood, staring up at stars that seemed impossibly distant. 15 years of guilt over saving his partner's life. 15 years of believing he'd chosen loyalty over duty, love over justice. But the truth was so much simpler, so much more devastating. He'd never had a choice at all. Chen. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. When did Sophia really start investigating that cold case? I told you. 6 months ago, after... No. When did she really start? Marcus turned to face her, and whatever she saw in his expression made her step back. Because I just realized something. Sophia doesn't investigate cold cases. She prosecutes current ones, active cartels, ongoing operations. She's never touched historical files in her entire career. Chen's silence stretched between them like a tripwire. Danny said Sophia was bait, Marcus continued, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. But bait for what? What was she really investigating, Chen? What did she find that was worth killing 3 prosecutors tonight to cover up? Chen's hand drifted toward her weapon, an unconscious gesture that told Marcus everything he needed to know. Jesus Christ. The realization hit him like ice water in his veins. You've been lying to me from the beginning. Sophia wasn't investigating Danny's old financial records. She was investigating current ones. Recent transfers, active operations. Marcus, how long have you known Danny was alive? Chen's composure cracked like glass under pressure. 2 years, maybe 3. We've been building a case. You've been building a case for 3 years and never thought to tell me my dead partner was running a cartel operation? Marcus's voice rose with each word. You let me carry that guilt, let me think I'd caused all those deaths by saving his life. When you knew he was alive the entire time? It was compartmentalized. Need to know. You were civilian. I was his fucking partner. Marcus slammed his hand against the truck's hood, the sound echoing across the empty lot. I was the one person who knew his methods, his tells, his weaknesses. But you kept me in the dark because what? Because you thought I might warn him. The accusation hung between them like a loaded gun. Chen's face went pale. No, Marcus. Not because we thought you'd warn him. Because we thought he might kill you if he knew you were helping us. But there was something else in her eyes. Something that made Marcus's blood turn to ice. That's not it either, he said slowly. You kept me out of it because you needed me clean. You needed someone Danny trusted, someone he'd meet with alone. You've been planning to use me as bait from the beginning. Chen's hand was fully on her weapon now, though she hadn't drawn it yet. Marcus, you need to calm down. How many people know Sophia is my daughter? What? It's a simple question. How many people in law enforcement know that Sophia Valdez, federal prosecutor, is the daughter of Marcus Valdez, former DEA agent? Chen's silence was answer enough. Marcus felt the last piece click into place, the final revelation that reframed everything that had come before. His hands stopped shaking. His voice went dead calm. Sophia doesn't know I'm her father. It wasn't a question. It was the truth he'd been hiding from himself for 6 months, ever since Sophia had started calling him about her mother's death, seeking closure he couldn't give her. The truth that made Danny's plan so perfectly, devastatingly simple. We changed her name in witness protection when she was 12, Marcus continued, his voice hollow. New identity, new family, new life. She grew up thinking her father abandoned her. She has no idea that the washed-up ex-agent Danny is using as bait is the man who gave her up to keep her safe. Chen finally drew her weapon, but she held it low, pointed at the ground. Marcus, step away from the truck. But Marcus was already moving, understanding flooding through him like poison. Danny's dying words on the phone, you're going to need your service weapon. Not for self-defense, for execution. Danny had spent 3 years setting up the perfect revenge, forcing Marcus to choose between saving his daughter and revealing the truth that would destroy her faith in everything she'd built her life on. The cruel genius of it was breathtaking. Even if Marcus saved Sophia, he'd have to tell her who he really was, and when she learned that her father had given her away, that he'd spent 15 years watching her from a distance without ever reaching out, it would kill her just as surely as Danny's bullet. Marcus started his truck's engine. In the rearview mirror, he could see Chen raising her weapon, shouting orders he couldn't hear over the roar of blood in his ears. Danny had been wrong about one thing, though. This wasn't about the debt Marcus owed for saving his life. This was about the price of loving someone more than your own life, and learning that sometimes love isn't enough to save anyone. Marcus drove into the desert with Chen's headlights following at a careful distance, her FBI protocols warring against the reality that she needed him alive for whatever endgame was coming. The radio crackled with news updates. 4 more prosecutors dead in coordinated strikes across Texas and New Mexico. Danny wasn't just cleaning house anymore. He was declaring war on the entire federal justice system, and Sophia had been the spark that lit the fuse. The coordinates Danny had sent led to a truck stop 40 miles outside Tucson, the same one where Marcus had met informants during his DEA years, where he'd made deals that saved lives and compromised souls in equal measure, where he'd learned that justice wasn't a sword but a scale, constantly tipping between necessary evils and impossible choices. Chen pulled up beside him in the parking lot, her face grim in the dashboard light. Through his open window, Marcus could hear her on the phone again, speaking in the clipped sentences of someone whose authority had just been stripped away. "They're shutting down the entire Southwest Task Force," she said after hanging up. "Effective immediately. Too many leaks, too much exposure. As of midnight, we're officially off the books." Marcus checked his service weapon, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had failed. 15 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Enough bullets to end this, if he could get close enough to Danny. Not enough if this was the trap he suspected it was. "He's not going to let either of us walk away from this," Marcus said. "You understand that, right? Danny's dying anyway. Cancer, experimental treatment, borrowed time. This isn't about money or power anymore. This is about legacy, about making sure his version of the story is the only one that survives." Chen pulled a tablet from her car, fingers flying across the screen. "The financial records Sophia uncovered. I've been analyzing them while we drove. The money trail doesn't lead to Mexico like we thought. It leads to Switzerland, to the Cayman Islands, to banks that launder money for terrorist organizations." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not just cartel corruption, not just cross-border drug money, international terrorism financing. The kind of operation that could fund attacks on American soil that could destabilize entire regions. The kind of operation that made El Chapo look like a street corner dealer. "How long?" Marcus asked. The earliest transfers date back 17 years, right after 9/11, when everyone was focused on Middle Eastern financing. Danny positioned himself perfectly, a trusted DEA agent with access to seized cartel assets, with connections across Mexico and the Southwest. He wasn't just stealing drug money, he was weaponizing it. Marcus thought about the warehouse raid 15 years ago, about the choice he'd made to save his partner's life instead of capturing El Chapo. But now he understood what he'd really done that night. He hadn't just let a drug lord escape, he'd protected the architect of a financing network that had funded God knew how many attacks, how many deaths, how many wars fought in shadows across 3 continents. The weight of 2,000 ghosts doubled, tripled, became infinite. "Sophia found proof," Chen continued. "Bank routing numbers, account transfers, digital signatures. Enough evidence to bring down not just Danny, but his entire network. Enough to expose 15 years of institutional failure. Enough to destroy the FBI, DEA, and half the Justice Department," Marcus said quietly. "That's why they pulled you off the case. That's why there's no cavalry coming. The people who could authorize a rescue operation are the same people who covered up the leaks that made Danny's network possible." Chen's tablet buzzed with an incoming message. She read it twice before showing Marcus the screen. "Final coordinates. Come alone. 1 hour. Bring the files Sophia found, or bring a shovel to bury her." Below the message was an address Marcus recognized. Not the warehouse where Danny had supposedly died, but another one 5 miles south. A place where the DEA had conducted interrogations during the worst years of the cartel wars. A place where screams echoed off concrete walls and justice was measured in blood extracted rather than truth revealed. "He's not planning a meeting," Marcus said. "He's planning a memorial service. For all of us." Chen started her engine, but Marcus reached through his window and grabbed her arm. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You could drive away right now. Report that you lost me in the desert. Live to fight another day." She looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You still don't understand, do you? I can't walk away because this isn't just about Sophia anymore. Those files she found, they're not just evidence of Danny's crimes. They're proof of who helped him, who covered for him, who made his network possible. Chen." "My name is on those files, Marcus. My signature on transfer authorizations. My approval on evidence disposals. My reports that buried investigations before they could expose the truth." She pulled free of his grip, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and guilt. "I didn't help build Danny's network on purpose, but I helped build it all the same." Marcus stared at Chen through the desert darkness, her confession hanging between them like a death sentence. The woman he'd trusted, the agent he'd believed was fighting alongside him, another piece in Danny's elaborate 15-year game. How many others? His voice came out steady, dead calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "I don't know." Chen's hand trembled on her weapon. That's what Sophia was trying to determine. How deep the corruption went, How many of us signed papers we shouldn't have, approved transfers that should have raised red flags? Danny was brilliant, Marcus. He made it look routine, administrative oversight, bureaucratic necessity. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, some last vestige of faith in institutions, in the idea that justice was more than just another word for revenge dressed in legal robes. Chen hadn't been hunting Danny. She'd been hunting herself, trying to understand how completely she'd been used. The night we raided the warehouse, Marcus said, "You knew, didn't you? You knew Danny was dirty." Chen's silence stretched like a wire under tension. "That's why you let me go in first. Why you positioned yourself where you'd have a clear shot at El Chapo, but not at Danny. You were hoping the cartels would solve your problem for you." I suspected. The words came out broken, but I couldn't prove it. "And when you saved his life, when he disappeared in that explosion, I thought maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the guilt was just making me paranoid." Marcus understood now why Danny had orchestrated this confrontation with such meticulous care. It wasn't just about revenge against the partner who disrupted his plans. It was about exposing the rot that had made those plans possible, about forcing everyone who'd enabled him to face the consequences of their willful blindness. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, 30 minutes, both of you. "Or Sophia dies slow." "He knows we're together," Marcus said. "Probably has been watching us this entire time." Chen looked around the empty truck stop, at the shadows between abandoned big rigs, at the endless desert that could hide an army. The coordinates he sent, that warehouse is a kill box. No cover, no escape routes. If we go in there together, we die together. Marcus finished the thought. And Sophia dies anyway, because that was never really negotiable. Danny's not planning to let any of us walk away from this. But even as he said it, Marcus felt the pieces of Danny's endgame shifting in his mind like a puzzle solving itself. The financial records Sophia had found, the evidence of institutional corruption, the network of compromised agents and prosecutors. Danny wasn't just seeking revenge, he was seeking exposure. He wanted the entire system to burn, and their deaths would be the match that lit the fire. Unless, Marcus pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't called in years. "Chen, those files Sophia found, are they digital or hard copy?" "Digital." "Why?" "Because Danny's dying anyway. The cancer, the experimental treatments, he's on borrowed time. But his network isn't. There are other players, other beneficiaries who want to keep the financing operation running after he's gone." Marcus found the contact he'd been looking for, Rafael Santos, former DEA, now working private security for a media conglomerate. A man who'd lost his career to the same institutional corruption that had protected Danny for 15 years. "What if Danny isn't just planning to kill us?" Marcus continued. "What if he's planning to make us heroes? Dead agents who died exposing the truth, martyrs whose deaths would force a congressional investigation, media attention, public outrage." Chen stared at him. "You think he wants the network exposed?" "I think he wants to control how it's exposed. Dead men tell no tales, but their evidence speaks for them. If we die trying to save Sophia, if those files are found on our bodies along with proof of how deep the corruption goes, the implications crystallized with horrible clarity. Danny would emerge as a whistleblower, a dying man who'd sacrificed everything to expose institutional rot. The money that had funded terrorist operations would disappear into new accounts, new networks. The corruption would be cleaned up just enough to satisfy public outcry, but the system that enabled it would remain intact. Marcus started walking toward his truck. "We're not going to the warehouse. Marcus, if we follow Danny's script, everyone wins except us. The Bureau gets to blame everything on a few rogue agents. Danny gets his revenge and his legacy. The network gets to rebrand and rebuild." He opened his truck door, decision crystallizing like ice in his veins. "But there's one thing Danny didn't account for." "What?" Marcus looked at Chen with something that might have been pity. He forgot that I know him better than anyone alive. I know his tells, his backup plans, his exit strategies, and I know where he'd really take Sophia. Not the warehouse from the coordinates. Not the obvious trap designed to make their deaths look heroic. but the place where Danny had always gone when he needed to disappear completely. The place Marcus had never told anyone about, not even Chen. The place where this had to end. The ghost town of Cerro Blanco sat like a wound in the desert, 20 miles from the nearest highway. Danny had discovered it during their second year as partners, when they'd chased a smuggling crew into the mountains and found themselves lost among abandoned mine shafts and crumbling adobe walls. It had become his sanctuary, the place he'd disappear to when cases went sideways, when the weight of compromises became too heavy to carry. Marcus parked at the edge of the settlement, leaving his headlights on to cut through the pre-dawn darkness. Chen pulled up beside him, her face pale in the dashboard glow. Neither of them spoke as they checked their weapons one final time. The silence between them had evolved beyond words into something heavier, the shared understanding that they were walking toward their own funeral. Sophia's voice drifted from the ruins before they'd taken 10 steps, not screaming, not pleading, reciting case law in a steady professional tone that made Marcus's chest tighten with recognition. Even bound and facing death, his daughter was still fighting the only way she knew how, with words, with legal precedent, with the unshakable belief that justice was more than just an abstract concept. They found her in what had once been the town's saloon, tied to a support beam that had somehow survived 60 years of wind and neglect. Danny sat across from her in a folding chair, looking exactly as he had 15 years ago, except for the 4 drip running into his arm and the oxygen tank at his feet. Cancer had hollowed his face, but not his eyes, which still held the same calculating intelligence that had made him the best undercover agent Marcus had ever known. "Right on time," Danny said without looking up. "Though I notice you brought company, despite my instructions." Marcus kept his weapon lowered, scanning the shadows for additional threats. "It's over, Danny. The network's blown. Chen's already transmitted copies of Sophia's files to news outlets and congressional oversight committees. Killing us won't stop the exposure. It'll just confirm everything she found." Danny's laugh turned into a coughing fit that sprayed blood across his shirt. When it passed, he gestured toward Sophia with genuine pride. "She's remarkable, you know. Spent 6 hours walking me through every financial transaction, every compromised decision, every institutional failure that made my operation possible. Never once asked for mercy, never once offered a deal. Just pure, relentless professionalism." Sophia's eyes found Marcus in the darkness, and he saw the exact moment she recognized him, not as the security consultant she'd been corresponding with about her mother's death, but as something deeper. The shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his weapon. Genetic memory asserting itself across 15 years of separation. "Dad?" The word came out broken, confused, heavy with the weight of a dozen revelations crashing together. Danny smiled. "There it is. The moment I've been orchestrating for 3 years. Marcus, meet your daughter. Sophia, meet the father who gave you away to keep you safe, then spent the rest of his life watching you from a distance like some kind of tragic guardian angel." Marcus felt Chen tense beside him, felt the weight of his service weapon in his hand, felt the ghosts of 2,000 dead settling onto his shoulders like a shroud, but all he could see was Sophia's face, the hurt and confusion and desperate hope warring across features that mirrored his own. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words carried 15 years of accumulated grief. "I'm so goddamn sorry." "Family reunions are touching," Danny interrupted, "but we have business to finish." He pulled a detonator from his jacket pocket with his free hand. "Enough C4 planted around this town to level everything within a quarter mile. Insurance, you might call it. To ensure my story gets told properly." Chen raised her weapon. "Stand down, Danny. It doesn't have to end this way." "Doesn't it?" Danny's finger hovered over the trigger. "Marcus saved my life 15 years ago, and I've spent every day since proving that mercy was the wrong choice. How many people died because I lived, Chen? How many attacks were funded with money I laundered? How many families destroyed by an operation I built?" Marcus understood then that this had never been about revenge or exposure or justice. This was about absolution, Danny's last desperate attempt to transform himself from architect of horror into instrument of accountability. He wanted Marcus to kill him, wanted to die at the hands of the partner whose misguided mercy had enabled 15 years of atrocity. "No," Marcus said quietly, lowering his weapon. "I won't give you that. You want redemption? You want to balance the scales? Then help us save her. Help us save everyone. For a moment that stretched like eternity, Danny stared at his former partner across the ruins of their shared history. Then, with movements that seemed to surprise even him, he set down the detonator and reached for the ropes binding Sophia's wrists. The explosion came from outside, Chen's backup arriving with enough firepower to flatten what remained of Cerro Blanco. But by then, Marcus was already carrying his daughter toward the truck, Danny's bag clutched in his free hand, racing against time and betrayal and the accumulated weight of choices that had finally, mercifully, led him home.